where the dreaming trees whisper. Sure, you're safe now. You've made it to this quiet moment, between one breath and the next. Tonight, I want to take you somewhere soft, somewhere gentle, a place that exists just beyond the edge of your thoughts, where dreams grow like leaves on ancient trees, and the path ahead is made of light and memory. This is the story of two girls, both searching for something they couldn't name, a sense of belonging, a voice they hadn't used, a dream they had almost forgotten. Their journey begins in silence, but leads to something quietly powerful: friendship, courage, and the magic of finding yourself in the place between sleep and waking. So let go. Let your body soften. Let your mind wander, and follow the sound of the dreaming trees. They're waiting for you. She wasn't the only keeper walker anymore. She was one of many. One of us. Dove-Hashi let her story become seed. Let those who hear it bloom. And let the world remember. Even the quietest whisper can awaken a forest. Crescent Moon, the end of part 3, and of Seraphina's journey. Thank you for listening. Let your heart rest now. Let the night hold you. And remember, you are never lost. You are only on your way home. She returned home, soaked but peaceful, and curled up in bed without turning on the lights. The moment her eyes closed, the silence changed. Not the absence of sound, but a kind of presence in the quiet. And then, she was no longer in her bed. Myra opened her eyes to a forest that glowed like starlight made into leaves. She wasn't afraid. Not even surprised. Everything felt right. The trees hummed softly, as if greeting her by name. The grass whispered beneath her bare feet. And the sky above was not night, not day, but something in between. She took a step forward. The ground pulsed gently, and a path appeared, woven from mist, moss, and memory. Somewhere, far ahead, a light flickered, not threatening, just waiting. Lyra stepped onto a bridge of silver threads, suspended over a lake that didn't reflect the sky, but her childhood. She saw flashes. The moment she first wrote a poem. The first time she cried without knowing why. The feeling of holding someone's hand and not wanting to let go. The air was thick with dreams. They hung in the sky like paper lanterns, glowing with gentle curiosity. Something shifted, like two melodies finding the same key. Lyra turned toward the sound. And in the distance, walking the path beneath the dreaming trees, was Myra. Their eyes met. Not startled, not confused, just a soft, shared knowing. And the forest sighed, as if it, too, had been waiting for this. They stood for a moment, Mira and Lyra, on opposite ends of a clearing bathed in pale light. Between them, the grass shimmered as if dusted with stars. And though they had never spoken before, it felt like remembering a song they both knew. Lyra took a breath first. It came out soft, like wind through leaves. "Have we met before?" she asked. Myra smiled gently, I don't know, but it feels like we have. They walked toward each other, not rushing, just letting the space close between them like a curtain of starlight being drawn. When they stood side by side, the forest shifted. Branches above formed a soft canopy, and a path unfolded at their feet, woven of silver bark and glowing moss. A breeze stirred, carrying the scent of lavender and old pages. Without words, they began to walk. The Evervale welcomed them like a memory rediscovered. To their left, a stream sang lullabies in a language only the heart understood. To their right, flowers opened as they passed, releasing tiny bursts of golden light. Memories of strangers, drifting upward like fireflies. They came to a grove of trees unlike the others. The bark shimmered, almost translucent, and hanging from each branch were glassy spheres, dreams waiting to be lived. They paused at one. Inside floated an image. A little girl holding a lantern, walking into a storm but glowing with warmth. "That's you," Lyra whispered. Mira didn't deny it. She felt the heat of it in her chest. They moved deeper into the grove, and a gentle rustling sound emerged. Not from the trees, but from behind them. A figure stepped out of the mist. It was neither fully animal nor human. A tall, elegant creature with antlers woven with vines, eyes like deep pools of time, and a voice that sounded like wind brushing stone. "You are far from where you began," it said, "but close to where you must go." Lyra felt her hands tremble. "Where is that?" The creature bent low, placing one hand upon the earth. "Where your fear meets your longing," it said. "Where you begin to listen to what is always whispering." And then it disappeared into mist, as silently as it had arrived. They sat on a soft mound of moss. The stars above them moved slowly, as if swimming through ink. "I don't even know why I'm here," Lyra confessed. "I just felt lost, and then I followed something I didn't understand." Mira nodded. "Me too. Like I wasn't awake in my own life. Like everything was a half-finished story." They didn't need to explain further. There was a kind of comfort in naming the feeling without solving it. As they spoke, tiny petals began to drift from above, though no tree could be seen. Each petal, upon touching the ground, formed into a small symbol. A key, a spiral, a feather, a mirror. The mirror caught Mira's eye. She picked it up, and instead of her face, she saw her voice. It shimmered as a glowing ribbon, winding through the air like a soft melody. She hadn't realized it was beautiful or strong. Lyra picked up the feather. It turned into a quill in her hand, and she felt something awaken inside. The urge to write, to express, to breathe out all the thoughts she had held in for too long. They smiled at each other. Not the smile of strangers, the smile of those who have stood at the edge of themselves and found another soul waiting there too. Later, they reached the lake of quiet questions. The surface was still as glass, but when they leaned close, they saw not themselves, but the versions of them who had followed every what if. What if I had never ignored my dreams? What if I had spoken, danced, wondered, dared? For a moment, it was overwhelming, and then comforting, because they realized they could still choose. The versions in the water hadn't vanished. They were waiting to be lived. The forest darkened slightly, not with threat, but with a sense of closing. The versions in the water hadn't vanished. They were waiting to be lived. The forest darkened slightly, not with threat, but with a sense of closing. A clearing opened ahead. In its center, a low stone bench, and beside it, a small fountain that whispered as it flowed. They Saturday. Neither spoke. They just breathed, listening to the fountain's song, feeling the warmth between them. The air grew gentle, a hush that said, "You are safe here." And as sleep began to call them both, the forest wrapped itself around them, not to trap, but to hold. Something inside her had shifted. She stood, stretched, and walked barefoot through the dew to the old well, just to be sure it had all been real. And though the glowing thread was gone, the silence around her now felt alive, like something watching gently, waiting for her next step. Lyra woke with her hand still curled around the seed. The rain had passed, but the window still glistened with droplets catching the early light. She sat up slowly, pressing the box to her chest. For the first time in a long time, she didn't feel like a ghost in her own life. She felt present, like someone who had been handed back a missing piece of herself. She opened her journal, turned to a blank page, and wrote, "I dreamed a forest that knew my name." And for once, the words came easily. Weeks passed. Mira began to sing again, softly at first, but louder as her voice grew steadier. She spoke in village meetings, shared her thoughts, and began to guide others who also felt quiet inside. She wore the pendant always, not for fashion, but as a reminder that her voice had weight and light and warmth. Lyra planted the seed in the small garden behind her house. Nothing happened the first day, or the second, but by the 7th morning, a tiny sprout emerged, its leaves veined with silver. She wrote every day after that. Poems, letters she never sent, and one small story about a girl and a forest that glowed with the light of forgotten dreams. People began to read her work, to feel seen, to write back. One night, years later, Mira stood again beneath a sky washed in lavender. She held a lantern, walking slowly through a familiar grove. From the other side of the clearing, another lantern flickered into view, and Lyra stepped out. Older, wiser, but the same. They smiled, not as strangers, not even as friends, but as souls who had once walked the dreaming wood together and learned how to wake. Epilogue, if you remember the trees. Sometimes, in that space between wakefulness and dreams, you might feel something calling, a shimmer in the quiet, a pull you can't explain. If you do, Don't rush past it. Pause. Close your eyes. And listen. Perhaps a path will unfold at your feet. Perhaps two girls will pass you in the forest, laughing softly, hand in hand. And maybe, just maybe, you'll remember the whisper of the dreaming trees and follow.